Let's entertain some of the ways people have discussed changing the Celebration Bowl, including turning it into a playoff format, and also Trey Oliver has been proven right about his recruiting process. Oh yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked on HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Now, I want to talk about this Celebration Bowl. And yes, we talked about the North Carolina Central side of things. We talked about the Jackson State side of things. And to kind of cap off our Celebration Bowl coverage, because it's going to be the last time we talk about it this week, I wanted to kind of look at the ways that people have suggested changing the Celebration Bowl. And it has nothing to do with the outcome. Some people think it's going to be more lucrative. Some people just think it'd be fun to add more teams to the mix. All of these things are, I would say, reasonable reasons to want to alter how the Celebration Bowl happens. One was turning it into a playoff format, and the other was to combine it on the same day with a D2 sort of championship, kind of the D2 version of it between the CIAA and then also the SIAC champions. So I'll get into the playoff one first, because that's the one that really I like. It's 4-team playoff. I don't want to go above that. Let's just go ahead and go with the 4-team playoffs, because it's only 2 conferences. I don't need 8 different teams, right? I don't need the top 4 from the SWAC and the top 4 from the MEAC. I don't need that kind of tournament, right? So just give me 2 from the SWAC, 2 from the MEAC, and it's real easy when it comes to the MEAC. They don't have a celebration, they don't have a championship game. So all you do is take the champion and the second place standing. That's it. It's real simple. You go to the standings. All right, first place, second place. Those are my 2 MEAC representatives. Now it gets a little bit tricky when you get into the SWAC, because it also brings up the question of how do you want to do it, because they do have a championship game. So with me, I'm going to look at it like this. This is how I'm going to look at it. There's 2 ways you can get it done. I want you to let me know what you think, right? This is my personal opinion. This is the 4 teams is what I saw. This is my personal opinion on how we can make it work. One, you keep the SWAC championship, or no, you scrap the SWAC championship in name, right? Just so it's not called the SWAC championship. And you take those 2 teams, the SWAC West and the SWAC East winners, and you have them be in the first playoff game. And then you make the MEAC, those 2 teams who finish first and second, they play in a MEAC championship, but it's really still a first round. So it's basically like both of these teams or both of these conferences are forced to have a conference championship name, and we just don't call it that. Right. So it's just a championship game under a different title, to be honest. But that's your first round. The top 2 teams from the MEAC play each other, and also the top 2 teams from the SWAC play each other. And you could still have the Celebration Bowl happen on the 17th, or it was 17th this year. It'll be on a different date next year, but you can still have it in that same scheduled part, right? That same scheduled part of December. But here goes the other option. And this one might take a little bit of finesse. You could still have the SWAC championship game. So the MEAC still ends their season a couple of weeks earlier. Then you have the the SWAC championship game. And then whoever wins that is the first seed in the SWAC. This one is the most interesting one to me of the 2 that I came up with. So the winner of the SWAC championship is the first seed in the SWAC. Then the second seed is decided by whoever has the best conference win percentage. Because, of course, that team in the SWAC championship game that lost, they might have an extra loss, right? But it's whatever the percentages are. So this year, it would have been FAMU. But on another occasion, it could have been the same 2 teams that were in the SWAC championship game. Let's say both of these teams went undefeated because they didn't have to face each other. And now they met in the SWAC championship game. One's going to win, one's going to have a loss. However, the loser is still going to have the second best conference win percentage. Then that team would be back into the playoffs. That's how it would be. So it's not like a championship game or a playoff eliminator. It's just, all right, you have the second seed now. And if you win, obviously you have the first seed. Then where you go from there is on December 17th. Maybe you have a doubleheader of 2 games between the first seed in the SWAC and the second seed in the MEAC, and then the first seed in the MEAC versus the second seed in the SWAC. The reason I think this needs to be the case is because I don't want the first place teams going against each other in the first round, right? Because we're still going to have our Celebration Bowl. You want to have the 2 best teams in the biggest game, or at least have the opportunity for it, right? So because of that, you have to go 1 versus 2 and 1 versus 2. And you don't want it to be just SWAC versus SWAC, then MEAC versus MEAC. Otherwise, you just would have went with my first metric. Now, these are the couple of interesting possibilities you have. First off, you can have 2 seed versus 2 seed. That's fine. That means they're the best team. Or you could have SWAC versus SWAC, MEAC versus MEAC. Because who knows? Who says the MEAC doesn't just sweep the SWAC on that first game? These are a lot of interesting possibilities. Let me know what you think. And then also, is there a way that we can get some of the independents, so to speak, in there? Like North Carolina A&T, right? Because North Carolina A&T would have been, I think, at worst, a 3rd seed. Or maybe 4th seed. Because, FAMU had a better record than them. But I think that North Carolina A&T, if we were going off of this year, would have snuck in as a 4th seed. Is there a way where we can form some sort of criteria to get them in, or are they just, you left the MEAC, so you're done with this? Or can we get Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, Hampton? Can we get them involved in something like this if they don't make it to the FCS playoffs? I don't know. I think that would be interesting. But here's the 3 options as far as playoffs go. You can have the SWAC championship game turn into a first round playoff bid, along with a MEAC championship game. You can have them still play that SWAC championship to decide who's going to be the first seed for that conference. And then also whoever is the second best conference record is going to be your second seed in the SWAC. Then you have a tournament between those 2 teams and then the 2 representatives from the MEAC. Or maybe you just find a way to make the independents a little bit more accessible. I don't know. These are all interesting to me. But another way is just making it a whole double header between the Celebration Bowl, between the FCS teams, and then also you have the CIAA and the SIAC teams going against each other. Look, I'm not going to knock it. I'm not on the money side. Like, I don't really deal with the monetary side of things, but I can't imagine how much money would be generated. It would probably help those D2 schools as well. Maybe you have them both in Atlanta back to back. I know from I've seen high schools kind of do it. I don't know if it works the same way with the collegiate level. So maybe you have another location, but then also you probably wouldn't do Atlanta for them. Who knows? But you could have 2 locations, both going to be televised on ABC, different broadcasting crew, but they're both televised right after each other. And it's kind of a double header and a full day of HBCU football. And if it still falls in the 17th, you probably won't really have to go against many bowl games from the FBS level. And if you do, they're not big ones. Like, you're not going against the Sugar Bowl. You're not going against the Cotton Bowl or the Peach Bowl. None of that. You're just going against some miscellaneous bowls. And I think that's interesting. I like that spectacle. I like the idea of it being a doubleheader and being on TV. I think the D2 teams, they've had far runs. Bowie State went far recently. You look at Benedict, who was a number 1 seed. It might not be as attractive for them. They might like the playoff system, and if that's the case, you let them do it. I'm more the playoff side anyway for the FBS or for the FCS. That's my side of it. Let me know what you think. I say they both kind of attractive, but I would go with the playoffs for the FCS over anything else. That's my person. Not the FCS playoffs, but like the FCS teams having an HBCU playoff format. Let me know what you think in the comments below, of course. But going forward, we are going to be talking about Trey Oliver, and I think he's been vindicated. All those people who gave him flack for the way that he recruited when he first came in, he can laugh in their face now. I'm going to tell you why, but first, let me tell you about Bet Online. Yes, today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online, the number 1 place for all of your sports wagering. If you want to put some money down, there's only one place to do it. I love Bet Online because they allow me to make smart bets. See, sometimes I think I know it all, but then I go to Bet Online and I get informed. I say, I didn't know that. But now that I do, I can make my bet accordingly. And that's the most important thing. They don't want you to make stupid bets. A lot of places want you to make stupid bets. They want you to make educated bets, which is going to lead to you making more money. Why not get down with somewhere who actually wants to make you money? And that's Bet Online, the best odds, the best props, best everything out, and they're extremely versatile, along with being the fastest and easiest. With a wager on all of your favorite sports, Bet Online, where the game starts. As we keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on Sports Today. Just go ahead and type it in where you are right now because you can get this anywhere you listen to your podcast. Let's see the local experts that Peter Bukowski is bringing on to break down the national stories. Today's word of the day is gainsay, meaning to deny or disagree with something. And Trey Oliver had a lot of people gainsaying, and that is a word. You know, it doesn't sound right, but it is a word. He had a lot of people gainsaying what his recruiting tactics were when he first got to North Carolina Central. And I would tell anybody to go look at North Carolina Central's 2019 recruiting class. Oliver got there in December of 2018. You had some, early enrollees. You had some people. And if you just go to the website, the whole list isn't there. So maybe just go to this roster right now and just look at the people who are redshirt juniors, redshirt sophomores, junior, just a true junior, and then also some of the older guys to see when they transferred in. Most of these guys that I'm about to list off are high school players, but there are a couple who came from a transfer portal as well in that first year. And this recruiting class is special. This recruiting class has a lot of players who really pushed this team this season, and it's been 4 years, 3 seasons because, we had that COVID year that was skipped. So this has been 4 seasons. What am I talking about, guys? This has been 4 years, 3 seasons since he's recruited. That's important to me because you'll never say that Coach Oliver won with the last guy's players. You'll never say that, And then also, this is the full maturation of his first recruiting cycle. He's been with them for 4 years now at this point. He knows them. He knows how to use them. He knows where they're great at. And he recruited a lot of players who, if you just look at this season, you'll be like, oh, okay, good guy. They all came from 2019? Yes, this was the season that set the stage for the Celebration Bowl victory, right? So let's get into some of these players as individuals because I've talked about them as a whole, as a group, but maybe you need to see the individual players so I'm not just gassing up the story. You look at Khalil Baker, a MEAC Defensive Player of the Year, first team AP All-American, the only one who can say that on the FCS level for North Carolina Central, right? You have that. You have the inaugural Aeneas Williams, which is the best defensive back in the HBCU landscape award winner. He really racked up the trophies this year, right? And that's who you had on your team, the defensive player of the game for the Celebration Bowl. Let's go ahead and switch sides. Let's look at Davius Richard. I know y'all thought I probably should have started with him, but we started with him enough times. I think we can let Khalil Baker get the first shine. But you look at Davius Richard, this is a guy who is going to be in your record books top 5. Coming into the season, I think he was 8th in passing yards, and he was top 10 in all-purpose yards. This guy is going to be top 5. In all of those metrics, as long as he stays, as long as he does not leave in a transfer portal, which I don't think he's going to, as long as he stays, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in multiple statistical categories. That's impressive. That's who you recruited. You keep going. That's the heart and soul on both your offense and your defense that you brought in one recruiting class. And if that wasn't special enough, let's go ahead and go to Robert Mitchell. He was a transfer. He was the offensive lineman of the year in the MEAC this year. He was an All-American. Davius Richard, he was an All-MEAC player. You're looking at Corey Bullock, who was another guy at the left tackle position, who was an all-conference player, an HBCU All-American. This is a unit that has their 2 best players coming from one draft, or one recruiting class, right? So then let's keep going. Let's switch. Matter of fact, let's switch to special teams, because I got 2 special teams players who need to be acknowledged. You look at Adrian Olivio. He has been all money, right? A sophomore All-American, his 2021 season. You're looking at 6 missed kicks in 3 years, and he had 3 his first year. And his freshman, he missed 3 kicks. He's missed 3 the next 2 years combined. All right, so we've seen the improvement. He knocked in 91% of his field goals in his sophomore year. So that's when he was really at his best, and he's still been good afterwards. He doesn't miss a lot of field goals. So you have a consistent kicker out of that recruiting class. But then you also have Brandon Codrington, who, yes, he is a cornerback, but also he's one of the best one of the best return men in the conference. There are so many different ways that you can validate this recruiting class, and I haven't even finished all of the players. But I have told you about the heart and soul of the offense. I told you about the heart and soul of the defense. I told you about a key contributor on the kicking game and then also the return game. These are all the different facets of football. And you've recruited major players at every single level. You have Quantrez Mansfield, and he was off to a really hot start on the defensive line this year. Latrell Collier, the leading rusher in the conference, the guy who was a monster in the Celebration Bowl. He had that massive stiff arm that everybody's going to remember. But, flashback to Monday's episode. If you haven't checked it out, please go do that. He also was killing them all day on the ground, just period. We didn't need a highlight to show that. It just made a little bit more attention for Collier. Mookie was balling the whole day. Now let's continue and go to our last player. You have Jesse Mallett, who was third on the team in sacks this year, despite only playing 8 games. In his first recruiting class, Coach Oliver brought in 9 contributors. That was in 2019. These are 9 contributors in the Celebration Bowl victory in 2020. Some of the players left due to injury, but it's full of all-conference, all-American players. These are the guys who started the journey. He recruited high school players because he felt like that's the foundation. And now we've seen them build the first story. And if he keeps recruiting like this, I can't see a roof for his tenure. 1 Celebration Bowl, 2 Celebration Bowls, because you recruited high school players, and a lot of these guys are going to roll over next year. Not only are you recruiting key contributors, you're also bringing in premier positions. Left tackle, edge, and not only a quarterback, but a quarterback in Davius Richard, who's going to be top 5 in school history in multiple statistical categories, such as all-purpose yards and then also passing yards. You recruited extremely well. If you can continue this, I don't think it's hyperbolic to assume that you can go on a North Carolina A&T type run with the Celebration Bowl victories. I cannot wait to see what they do next week or next year. Funny enough, that's going to be something we talk about on tomorrow's episode. So let me not get ahead of myself. Let's just go ahead and go to the next segment. And the next segment is going to be talking about Besean McCray, who is not in the future plans for Southern. And I think they let him know, and that's why he entered the transfer portal. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I won't be here tomorrow with a live episode. So I won't be talking about the signing day and the early signing day moves until next week. But I do have a pre-recorded segment or pre-recorded show for you guys that I think is really going to be interesting. I can't wait for you to hear it. I think it's really exciting. And I thought I put a lot of effort into it, and I put a lot of thought into it. I'll say that. But I do want to talk a little bit of transfer portal / early signing day news today. First off, Caleb Johnson is going to Prairie View. I saw that right before I came on and recorded. I just want to acknowledge that because he stayed in the SWAC, left Mississippi Valley, but he is still there. So the SWAC West is going to have to feel him. The only team in the SWAC West that don't have to feel him no more is Prairie View. So that's going to be an interesting change of pace, and we'll see how he partners with Trayvon Conley, who I think should be back next year. If I can't remember his eligibility off the top of my head. But now let's get into Besean McCray, who is leaving the SWAC. I don't think he's going to transfer anywhere else in the SWAC. I think he's going to leave, and we'll see where he goes from there. But he only spent 1 year at Southern. I think that's because they told him, or maybe he just saw the writing on the wall, he wasn't the quarterback they wanted any longer. And I think he lost that starting job 5 games left into the season. That first Jackson State game is when I feel like he really started to lose the grip of that job, and he just never was able to reestablish his grip from there on out. But every team goes into the season asking, who's going to be my quarterback? Some are able to roll over that answer from last year because some have long-term answers and some have short-term answers. Some people have to change that answer every single year. Those teams don't typically have success, but a lot of people aren't lucky enough to just have that quarterback who's going to be there for 3 years. If we're talking about the collegiate level, right? Have him for 2 years. Sometimes you just have a quarterback who's there and he's gone the next season. That's Besean McCray. He was not a long-term answer for Southern. Maybe they thought he was going to be when they recruited him, but those last 5 games to me showed that he wasn't. And I think one of the more telling things is I look at Glendon McDaniel, who took over for him in that SWAC championship. He's a graduate student who's been there since 2017. He shouldn't have any eligibility left. Eligibility moves a little funny nowadays, but he shouldn't have any eligibility left. So if he's not around and McCray's still leaving, that really speaks volume. And it says it's not that they have their guy. You're just not the guy, and that happens. That happens all the time. I'm not trying to bash or pile on him anything, but that's the reality of the situation if Glendon McDaniel is not coming back. Because McDaniel replaced him, and you would think, oh, okay, the guy who was in the SWAC championship game is just going to be their quarterback next year. It doesn't. I don't even know how he played this year, man. But I don't know how maybe he was a red shirt in his first year. But it was weird. But I don't think McDaniel should be able to be back next season. McCray won't be back either. And let me go through the last 5 games and tell you why I think that he did lose his position in those games. So you look at Jackson State the first time. The first time that they played Jackson State, this was the only game all year that he didn't have 100 total yards. Rushing and passing combined. He didn't have 100 yards. Then you look at FAMU the next week. He was solid on the ground, but it was pitiful through the air. You know, he didn't have 100 yards in that game. You look against Mississippi Valley State, that was the tough part because against Valley, he was off to a hot start. He had 2 passes for 67 yards and a touchdown. Looked like he was about to have himself a game, but then he was hurt. Tough. Now you go to Grambling. Grambling, the offense had flashes, but I was not really impressed with Besean McCray in that game. Then you look at Jackson State the second time in the conference championship. In the conference championship game, you get benched in the first quarter. You obviously didn't have a long leash and you ate it up quickly. So you're looking at the 5 games at the end of the season, 1 of which he was hurt, 4 of which he just did not play well. And at the last of those 4, he was benched. The writing was on the wall. If Southern did not tell him, hey, this is just not going to work, maybe he saw it wasn't going to work. But either way, when you're looking at Besean McCray, he saw he wasn't going to be a long-term answer for Southern. And that's just what it is. There's no need sitting there wasting your time. Maybe they even told him, look, you're not even going to compete for this. We're going to go out and get ourselves a new quarterback. Maybe they saw enough. Maybe he just realized, maybe he didn't like that he was benched in the SWAC championship. All of these things could be the truth, you know. I don't know what it is, but I do know that if he had a chance at starting in 2023 for Southern, I don't think he enters the transfer portal. And to me, it's indicative of that. So like I said, tomorrow I will not technically come through tomorrow, right? We'll still be here tomorrow and we'll be breaking down the teams that I'm most excited for going into next football season because I am a football addict and I am immediately talking about the next season after this one ends. So go ahead and join me. We have a pre-recorded show for you. You ain't gonna want to miss it, I promise. So I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. Every day, that's what you have to look forward to on tomorrow's episode. And for your second listen of the day, check out Peter Bukowski and all of the local experts on Locked On Sports Today, breaking down the national stories. In the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives right there. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.